Netflix's adaptation of the Castlevania franchise has shown a remarkable evolution, first with its original animated series, and now with the recent spin-off series Castlevania Nocturn. What started as a loose interpretation of the beloved video game series has developed into a sprawling universe of its own, where every season ends with leaving us wanting for more. Although Konami has had one of the greatest runs in the gaming world through all the Castlevania series, mostly because of its Metroidvania-style video games, the Netflix adaptations can easily be marked as the best animated series conjured up from a gaming lore. Both the show's length lies in their stunning animation, a penchant for intense violence, sensuality, and intricate character relationships. The Castlevania adaptations on Netflix may depict humanity as a repository of hidden truths, but it unquestionably offers quite an exhilarating experience. With the end of the 4-season animated show and the onstart of the new spin-off series, we have seen quite a lot of blood, gore, drama, and maybe a few dozen other heart-wrenching intense scenes that really make you think. We have accumulated a carefully curated list where we'll be delving into the standout moments from both the Castlevania animated series and Castlevania Nocturn, all in chronological order. Our selections are based on the heart-pounding excitement they delivered, catering to both newcomers and devoted fans of the Castlevania video games. So prepare your whips and get ready for an action-packed journey of the top 23 intense and heart-wrenching scenes in the Castlevania animated adaptations. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you, and let's begin. The death of Lisa Tepish. What better place to begin than the cataclysmic event that set all the future mishaps in motion? We all know how Dracula lived alone, away from human stupidity, and even made sure to take preventive measures to keep them away, but it was Lisa Tepish of Lupu who was brave enough to find his castle and enter it without permission. She eventually manages to pique the curiosity of the enigmatic Lord of the Night, and rather than fearing him, Lisa becomes entranced by his profound knowledge of the true sciences and hopes that his teachings can enhance her skills as a doctor. In a moment of vulnerability, Dracula acknowledges her as being different from most humans he's encountered recently and expresses a desire to help her rediscover her affinity for people, or at the very least, tolerate them without resorting to impaling them on stakes. Despite the brevity of their exchange, the chemistry between the future Mr. and Mr. Tepish is undeniable, making it easy to understand how these two could fall deeply in love and go on to live a very fulfilling life. Tragically, she is also the one person who keeps the Vampire King tethered to his humanity. So, when the Bishop of Targovest gets the ear of Lisa's growing popularity as a doctor, he invades her home and burns her lab to the ground, calling it Satan's Den. Naturally, Lisa falls victim to a senseless execution at the hands of the church's corruption, and honestly, her death is tragic to watch because this is a woman who has only wanted to help. Even on her dying breath, she urges Dracula to forgive the mortals due to their ignorance. But the Dark Lord is driven by grief and rage, and decides it's time for humanity to face its reckoning. First sign of Trevor Belmont's unwavering leadership. Initially, we see Trevor as a mean drunk who's trying to hide his family heritage as a monster hunter and always looking to make a quick buck. Trevor tries to get out of a situation unscathed as much as he can, even during that weird bar fight where the guy honestly has it coming, because the Belmont does try his best to avoid the fight. Anyways, in Greshit, when Trevor reveals the church's schemes of pinning the arrival of the demonic night creatures on the speakers, the crowd basically tears the wannabe priests alive. But right after this, a bunch of super scary night creatures rain down on the people of Greshit. This is the first time Trevor shows the inherent sign of being a true leader, rallying the townspeople to gather salt, asking a priest to bless a few jars of water, and basically showing them the swift guide to killing a night creature. Together with Sypha, they confront and vanquish these deadly creatures, including the menacing Blue Fangs. It's commendable how we see him throw his coat aside, revealing the Belmont crest and prance out his whip, taking charge of the situation at hand and leading the village to safety. Trevor Belmont fights the sleeping soldier. Their victory over the night creature raid in Greshit came at a price, as the ground beneath them began to quake, sending Trevor and Sypha tumbling deep into the catacombs. far below their initial starting point during previous visits. As they navigated the treacherous catacombs, the duo stumbled upon a mysterious coffin, where they found a handsome white-haired man sleeping. In a tense moment of uncertainty, Trevor believed him to be Dracula himself, while Sypha held steadfast to her belief that it housed the rumored sleeping soldier. Misinterpreting the intentions of this enigmatic figure, Trevor initiated a combat, landing a slash on the chest of his adversary. However, his momentary triumph gave way to desperation, as he found himself overpowered and pinned down. Driven by sheer determination, Trevor restored to a drastic measure, thrusting a knife into the vampire's chest, fully aware that it might cost him his own life. But he did not care. Trevor was a cynical person, and to him, having the satisfaction of knowing that he died while killing a monster was a happy demise. To his astonishment, the vampire chose not to retaliate and instead introduced himself as Alukard, Dracula's Dampier son. Now, this fight scene was a treat to watch because it was also the first time we saw Trevor finally meeting his match. It was almost as if each of their moves were in sync, even when they were fighting each other. Trevor with his whip and Alukard with his sword. The moment was nothing short of a majestic dance of death, but this rocky rendezvous went on to form the dream team that took down Dracula and eradicated the dark forces that haunted the show. Isaac kills Godbrand. We all know that irrespective of his annoying nature, Godbrand stood as a staunch advocate of the majority stance among the vampire generals in Dracula's court, wielding significant influence within their ranks. Nevertheless, Godbrand's downfall lay in his brash, outspoken, and socially careless nature, as he had a habit of voicing his desires and opinions without much consideration, often contemplating the consequences only after he had dug his own grave. He even went on to relentlessly question Dracula's plans for human genocide openly, and pushed the vampire lord to the brink of anger and frustration. Plus, what was his annoying need to discuss his treacherous ideas with Dracula's most loyal follower, Isaac? This dude had no self-awareness, and it really showed. He confided his intentions to betray Dracula without even assessing Isaac's willingness to join the cause, leaving himself vulnerable by blabbering every motive to take the vampire lord down. Now, unlike the Viking vampire, Isaac had no intention of turning on Dracula, as he believed in his cause without any doubt. Thus, he took it upon himself to eliminate Godbrand and prevent any potential trouble in the middle of the court, in a swift and ruthless transformation from self-flagellator to executioner. Isaac showed no mercy as he tore out Godbrand's throat and then watched him meet his fiery end. Invasion of Dracula's castle. This battle not only set the stage for the eventual clash with Dracula, but also underscored the inexplicably powerful capabilities of our three heroes when it came to dispatching vampires with ease. As they faced the entirety of Dracula's court for the first time, each hero showcased their unique talents in their own might. The castle was overridden by vampire generals who were still loyal to Dracula, and of course their army of vampires. We witnessed Trevor fully embrace his Belmont heritage by wielding his ancestral weapon, the Morning Star Whip. In a display of raw power, he unleashed devastating strikes upon these vampiric foes, charging up the whip to lodge into their bodies and naturally blasting them to ash. Sypha, on the other hand, harnessed an array of elemental techniques that left our jaws open, from blasting fire to jolting these vamps with electric waves and even piercing them with sharp ice shrapnel. Sypha's control over the elements was a sight to behold, as she unleashed her powers with precision and force. As for Alukard, like Trevor had asked him to do, the Dampier launched himself right from the top as he transformed into a white wolf and harnessed the ability to levitate his enchanted sword, making it a deadly instrument in his hands. He sliced through the vampires like a hot knife on a stick of butter, and ultimately took the fight to his father to put an end to his reign of terror. Further adding to the intensity of the scene, the iconic Bloody Tears from Castlevania 2 provided the musical backdrop, further enhancing the epic nature of this blood-curdling confrontation. Alukard stakes his father. As the trio finally make it to the Dark Lord's chamber, Alukard asks his father to surrender as the war is now over. but Dracula is never one to take orders, and thus their battle unfolds throughout the vast castle, leaving a path of destruction in its wake as they crash through walls and floors in the heat of their frenzied combat. Eventually, their confrontation leads them to Alucard's childhood room, which proves to be a poignant setting where Dracula confronts the heart-wrenching realization that he's battling his own son, who is his last living connection to Lisa, his sweet beloved wife. In a moment of clarity, Dracula allows Alucard to drive a stake through his heart. Shortly after this pivotal moment, Trevor and Sypha arrive, sealing the end of Dracula's reign of terror. They behead the fallen vampire lord and incinerate his remains, ensuring he could never rise to threaten humanity again. But here is one thing to note. Dracula allows his own demise. He takes a step back to allow Alucard to put a stake through his heart. So it is safe to say that had the vampire lord not come to his sudden self-reflection of his monstrosities, he would have definitely taken down the super trio with ease. Alucard kills Sumi and Taka, and then proceeds to abandon all hope. In the aftermath of Dracula's demise, Alucard opted to remain behind, steadfastly guarding the fortress of Dracula's castle and the esteemed Belmont keep. Alucard's loneliness was haunting, as at every moment we saw him feel the lingering absence of Trevor and Sypha, leaving a palpable void. One day Alucard was unexpectedly approached by two young vampire hunters, Sumi and Taka, who were well aware of Alucard's legendary status and approached him with a fervent desire to learn the intricate art of vampire hunting. Although initially reticent, Alucard eventually relented and agreed to become their mentor. In the days that followed, Alucard's bond with Sumi and Taka deepened as they embarked on their training. He began to share not only his extensive knowledge of vampire hunting, but also granted them access to the closely guarded secrets within the Belmont keep. However, there were certain aspects of the castle's intricate mechanisms that Alucard chose to withhold, dismissing their persistent inquiries. Yet one night, as Alucard wrestled with restless slumber, the situation took an unexpected and sinister twist as Taka and Sumi came into his room and began initiating a sexual encounter that swiftly spiraled into a malevolent trap. The hunters ensnared Alucard within a nefarious magical constraint and attempted to end his life. Desperation gripped Alucard as he pleaded fruitlessly for them to halt their assault. Ultimately, he had no choice but to summon his magical sword, employing it to deliver fatal wounds on Sumi and Taka, thus putting an abrupt and violent end to their treacherous act by slitting their throats open. Haunted by the traumatic betrayal he had endured, Alucard lay crying on their blood-soaked sheets and eventually became paranoid. He sought solace in an even more reclusive and solitary lifestyle, indulging in alcohol and taking it upon himself to eliminate any intruders who dared encroach upon his domain. The distraught Dampier grimly displayed their lifeless remains on pikes, much like the macabre deterrent reminiscent of his father Dracula. Trevor Belmont's double whip action. When the crucified visitor's sinister plan to open a portal to hell with the help of the monks at the priory came to fruition, the fate of the world literally hung in the balance, with only our beloved dynamic duo standing in the way. We are indeed talking about Belnades and Belmont. As the portal opened, evil forces literally started pouring in so they could guard the visitor and help him resurrect Dracula. Despite confronting nightmarish creatures, including a horde of fallen angels and the regenerating visitor, the Speaker and the last of the Belmonts managed to shift the tide of the battle and drive the malevolent forces back. And just when you thought Sypha's mastery over lightning was the pinnacle of this spectacle, Trevor unveiled a breathtaking display of his own. He realized that putting all the pressure on his Morningstar whip was simply not enough to deal with an entire army of undead. So he took out his other consecrated whip and together he channeled them in both hands, that too in the right sync, leaving us in awe. With his expert dual wielding of exploding whips, he took the battle to a whole new level, landing swift blows on this visitor and slicing it in two, right from the middle. Isaac's conversation with the night creature. After Dracula saved his life, Isaac embarked on a profound journey during Season 3, and amidst the bloodshed and violence, he found moments of deep contemplation regarding his purpose and the direction his life was taking. One striking example of this introspection can be found in a beautifully articulated conversation he had with a night creature named Fliss Eyes. Now, this night creature was a rare enigma because he was the only one well-versed in human speech. Isaac's curiosity led him to inquire about Fliss-Eye's past, prompting the demon to reveal that he was once a Greek philosopher hailing from Athens. But his life took a dark turn when he, along with his fellow philosophers, faced persecution for challenging the prevailing belief in God, which was considered heretical by the rising Christian authority. When Isaac sensed there was more to Fliss-Eye's story, the demon confirmed that under duress he was captured and tortured by the Christians until he reluctantly divulged information about his colleagues, an act he undertook for self-preservation. Despite his compliance, the Christians still took his life, and as a consequence of his betrayal, he was condemned to hell. Their overall conversation revolved around sin, punishment, and religious doctrine, alongside how these elements had been wielded to subjugate people. Through the philosopher's experiences in hell and eventual rebirth as a night creature, he confessed that he had learned to relish sin and the liberating truth that came from walking the path of the damned. He expressed an eerie gratitude to Isaac for granting him a second life and affirmed his intention to relish it. This revelation seemed to unsettle Isaac, leaving him contemplative in the wake of Fliss-Eye's haunting words. Amidst the philosophical exchanges, Isaac also engaged in remarkable action sequences of his own. One such instance involved him leading the charge against a malevolent magician who had enslaved the local residents. In an unexpected turn of events, the Forge Master found himself thrown into an intense boss fight as the magician used his mind-controlled minions, forming them into a grotesque, flesh-bound amalgamation that rained down from the sky. The thrill of witnessing Isaac's relentless charge towards his target, while skillfully dodging the human projectiles, was nothing short of breathtaking. Moreover, it was a treat for fans to witness the appearance of one of Castlevania's legendary boss monsters. Now, Isaac had his sights set on a tower emitting a sinister green light, which was manipulating countless individuals, coercing them into constructing an enigmatic structure. As Miranda had mentioned, this town held an abundance of bodies ripe for transforming into an army of night creatures. However, the enslaved humans began to resist, making the Forge Master's task considerably more challenging. Determined to end this reign of control, Isaac made his way to the source, the tower bathed in the eerie green light. Despite the relentless onslaught of human bodies descending from the sky, Isaac managed to summon a colossal night creature, leveling the playing field. Even so, Isaac barely advanced up the tower stairs, eventually reaching the room where the sinister magician awaited. Before he could strike a decisive blow, the magician ensnared him in the green light, leading to a desperate struggle for the Forge Master's freedom. With sheer determination, Isaac broke free from the light's grasp and wasted no time in using his knife to slit the magician's throat. As the magician's control waned, countless liberated bodies tumbled to the ground, free from his malevolent influence. Styria fights a human mob during the daylight, just when it seemed like the show had reached its peak in gore, bloodshed, and body count. It delivered one of the most visually stunning displays of carnage ever brought to life through animation. This incredible slaughterfest took place as Styria and Morana were in a camp outside Styria while planning Carmilla's strategy to basically conquer the whole world. Morana, grappling with the overwhelming workload and doubts about the sustainability of their territorial conquests, was trying to convince Styria out of this mundane future of thwarting resistances all their lives. But their discussion was abruptly interrupted by a group of humans launching a brazen attack on the vampire camp in broad daylight with no other option. Styria donned her absolutely stunning day armor and rallied her soldiers to defend their position. In a scene reminiscent of the striking visual style of Kentaro Miura's Berserk, Styria unleashed her fury on the intruders. With her huge-ass sword, she literally butchered these human beings, chopping them down till there was nobody left to fight. Her relentless assault was an absolute visceral and awe-inspiring display of her monstrous strength. Even though her adversaries were primarily desperate farmers trying to save their families from becoming vampire food. The judge's apple tree of doom. Just when Trevor and Sypha thought that the worst was behind them, they stumbled upon a shocking revelation in Lindenfield after vanquishing the visitor. The judge, who had presented himself as a benevolent leader, had concealed dark secrets from the town and had confessed to his gruesome pleasures right before his death, which included the murder of children in a manner similar to how he orchestrated the death of Sala, the leader of the monks. Now, the judge of Lindenfield had a rather macabre pastime. He took great pleasure in permanently ridding his town of nuisances. At first glance, seeing him outwit the malevolent priest and lead him to a deadly fate in a spike trap laid before his apple tree might seem like just an act. However, it soon becomes evident that this particular spike pit had seen frequent use over the years, as he often led people to his apple tree, causing them to trip and fall on his spike-bedded pit. The man was unbelievably twisted, as he even begged Trevor to burn down his house to get rid of the evidence that would connect him to the missing children in Lindenfield. He literally lured these kids near an apple tree, only to lead them to fall to their death on a bed of spikes, simply because they were naughty or ran around too much. What's even more chilling is that the judge even collected their little shoes as souvenirs of his accomplishment and locked them in a room that concealed a dark and twisted side to his seemingly righteous actions. Hector takes down the Queen of Styria. Carmilla's ambitious dream of reigning as a queen of the world came crashing down in the bloodiest fashion possible when Isaac and his night creature army laid siege to Styria. Isaac, using his large transportation mirror to open a rift in the sky, initiated his long-awaited assault on Styria, while Carmilla, engrossed in studying maps, suddenly found herself ambushed by a multitude of night creatures. Fueled by an unrelenting onslaught, she unleashed her pent-up rage upon her attackers, turning the room into a gruesome battlefield. As the battle raged on, Carmilla's strength began to wane, leaving the room drenched in blood and severed limbs. After a relentless and grueling exchange, Carmilla found herself cornered, and Isaac, aided by his best night creatures, closed in for the final confrontation. A visually stunning brawl ensued, with Carmilla's rage and inhuman abilities allowing her to hold out longer than most. Now, in no way was this a fair fight, because Isaac went in with a force, who took turns attacking her till she had no more left to fight back. Despite her last-ditch efforts, she was ultimately overwhelmed, with her clothes in tatters and her body now shutting down after numerous injuries. Carmilla refused to surrender. In typical Carmilla fashion, she decided to take control of her fate, ending things on her own terms, defiantly choosing to end her own life rather than be slain by a man. So the Queen of Styria indeed went out with a blaze of glory, spewing venom all the while. As her blade pierced her chest, Carmilla's body began to disintegrate, culminating in a fiery explosion. The Dream Team reunites to fight the bosses guarding Dracula's resurrection. After taking down Ratko and his troop of night creatures at Targovist, Trevor and Sypha went in search of Varney, who had already jumped through a transfer mirror into Dracula's castle. Naturally, the duo also went through the mysterious transfer mirror that transported them back to Dracula's castle, where they reunited with Alukard, and a series of battles followed as the trio faced off against the cult of Dracula in the form of many bosses, the dungeon boss, and his accompanying adversaries. Together they leaped onto the battlefield and swiftly shifted the tide of the battle. While Trevor skillfully wielded his recently acquired cross-knife weapon in tandem with the Morning Star whip, Alukard and Sypha seamlessly joined the fray in sync, as if the trio had never been apart. Their unity was put to the test when they faced Dragon's fire-breathing monster, but Sypha managed to hold back its flames, allowing Alukard to transform into a wolf and flank the creature. Before it could unleash another attack, Trevor delivered a decisive blow, causing the beast to explode. Following this victory, the trio split up and combed through the castle, rescuing as many people as possible. With the trio protecting them, the refugees remained safe from the invading vampires and night creatures. As Sypha handled the monsters at the entrance, Trevor ventured through the corridors and various rooms, saving survivors and eliminating any foes in his path. Meanwhile, Alukard encountered a powerful Viking vampire with the unique ability to teleport the location of his axis. Though the vampire posed a challenge, Alucard's mystery of his magic sword eventually led to the vampire's defeat. After completing their respective battles, the trio proceeded upstairs to confront Saint Germain. However, on their way, they faced Dragon and his team of necromancer vampires. Now these opponents were exceptionally skilled and provided a formidable challenge, pushing them to their limits. Alukard nearly fell victim to a stake, Trevor lost his trusty whip, and Sypha found herself ensnared in a restrictive magic field. But Trevor's quick thinking and precise aim with his cross knife allowed him to free Sypha, who then returned the favor to rescue Alukard. Together they dispatched the final two foes. Lastly, Dragon was left to face them alone, and dueled the trio in a formidable 3-on-1 showdown. Though this vampire proved to be a powerful adversary, the combined might of Trevor, Alukard, and Sypha eventually prevailed. With Dragon defeated, the trio passed on to confront Death and Saint Germaine. Saint Germaines Death. In a very shocking turn of events, Varney, the 100-year-old weird vampire who led the plan of Dracula's resurrection, unveiled his true identity as the alchemist, and even more astoundingly, he went on to disclose his identity as the embodiment of death itself, having been impersonating both characters all along. This revelation unfolded that Dracula had harbored intentions of exterminating all life on Earth, which would have bestowed death with immeasurable power. But this potential was thwarted when Dracula was killed at the hands of Alukard. So Death now required Saint Germain's assistance to resurrect Dracula and merge his soul with that of his wife, plunging them both into madness. In short, Death's sinister aim was to exploit Dracula and Lisa's deranged state within the Rebus to usher in unprecedented human devastation and benefit from it. As Saint Germain realized that he was simply a pawn in Death's mega plan, and realized what hell he had called upon Earth by infusing the Rebus with Dracula and Lisa's soul, his conscience drove him to aid Trevor in thwarting this ritual. Although Death erected a formidable force field to keep Trevor, Alukard, and Sypha at bay, the Belmont managed to breach the force field, and that's when Saint Germain went on to reposition the portal behind the Rebus and signaled Trevor to attack, who used his combat cross knife in combination with the holy water to successfully slice through the Rebus and stop Dracula's resurrection into a weird-looking golem once more. The resultant explosion propelled Trevor and Saint Germain outside, and during the struggle, Trevor's cross knife shattered, causing a shard to lodge into Saint Germain's chest, eventually meeting his demise. His death was tragic simply because this man was the ultimate simp, crossing timelines and whatnot for a woman who saw him dying from the shadows of the infinite corridor and simply vanished as Saint Germain breathed his last. This guy was lonely, without friends, and misunderstood, going lengths to save his one true love. But unfortunately, in the bigger scheme of things, this just did not seem to matter. Trevor Belmont Vanquishes Death. Honestly, this particular fight scene between Trevor and Death truly stands out as a crowning jewel in the series' legacy, drawing the curtains on its intricate storylines with a grand climax. Following the defeat of the Rebus, Trevor chooses to confront Death and put an end to his malevolent scheming, which has probably now been evident since the time Dracula first turned. In a tense showdown, Trevor initially finds himself incapable of inflicting any harm, as a malevolent entity overpowers him. Undeterred, he rises to his feet and deploys the Morning Star Whip to unleash a barrage of enormous projectile flames, creating a substantial distraction to gain an advantage. Seizing a moment of vulnerability, Trevor abandons the Morning Star Whip, quickly maneuvering behind Death to reassemble the magical dagger composed of 3 separate pieces, all of which he had acquired in Targovist, and reactivate the weapon's dormant magical powers. With unwavering resolve, Trevor stabs Death in the head just as the flames subside, unleashing the dagger's potent magical energy. This single strike served to either kill, permanently destroy, or banish Death's physical form. Throughout their fierce battle, Trevor proves to be unexpectedly skilled and even lands several significant blows on Death. When all appears to be lost, Trevor plunges the dagger he procured in Targovist directly into the entity's head. As Death erupts into a cataclysmic explosion, it seems that Trevor himself is erased from existence. Lenor embraces her death in the sunlight. As far as vampires go, within the Castlevania series, Lenor was probably the only bloodsucker who caused the least amount of damage. She was no doubt the queen of diplomacy and probably the world's most manipulative weapon, but her power came from her council of sisters, and with Carmilla's death, she could simply not hold on. In the series finale, Hector and Lenor engage in a poignant conversation about how power had ultimately tainted her life. Hector, in an attempt to console her, optimistically suggests that it's not the end, just a change. But Lenor astutely remarks that vampires are notoriously resistant to change, firm in her belief that there's no meaningful future for her as Isaac's captive. Lenor decides to take her own life by exposing herself to the morning sunlight. Initially, Hector endeavors to prevent her, but Lenor is resolute in her desire to witness the sun's power, essentially announcing her intent to end her life. Accepting her need for freedom, Hector watches Lenor step outside as the sun rises, gazing at the mountainous valley. As sunlight filters through the gaps between the mountains, she asks Hector if that's all there is to the sun. In response, Lenor smiles and calls him a silly man, before succumbing to the sun's lethal rays, disintegrating from ashes to dust while wearing a smile. Grief-stricken, Hector watches the painful spectacle, unable to smile back immediately. However, as he stands in the place where Lenor met her end, a smile eventually forms on his face as he looks toward the sun, signifying a sense of acceptance and resolution. Richter Belmont watches his mother's death at the hands of Olrox. Right from the beginning of the first episode of Castlevania Nocturn, we witness how riveting, tumultuous, and unpredictable life can be if you are a Belmont. Richter was only a boy when his mother, Julia Belmont, decided to send him to France as Boston just was not safe anymore, just before little Richter could reluctantly board the ship alone, leaving his mother behind to deal with the vampire-shaped crisis at hand. A menacing vampire named Olrox appeared at the premise. Although Julia asked her son to run to the docks and board the ship, he did not listen. Naturally, a battle ensued between Olrox and Julia, who took her iconic vampire killer whip to fight the malevolent vampire with piercing green eyes. Now, Julia had killed Olrox's one true love because he was a vampire, and so Olrox was out for blood. Almost when we thought Julia had Olrox, the vampire showed his magical prowess and turned into a huge dragon, attacking Julia and almost getting to Richter in the process. But as these stories go, Julia, in an attempt to save her son, lost control of her whip and could not subdue the dragon. Her magical abilities served no match as Olrox had cornered her, and before Richter could even process the entire situation, the dragon swiftly pierced through Julia's body with the sharp end of his tail, leaving her lifeless in a pool of her own blood. In that tender age, Richter witnessed the brutal murder of his mother right in front of him. He tried to shoot his amateur fire beams at the vampire, but of course he was no match for him. As Richter stared at his mother's body in utter shock, Olrox changed back to his vampirical form and justified his act by saying that Julia had taken away someone he had loved, so it was necessary for her to meet the same fate. Annette's journey from a slave child to a powerful mage. After Edward's death, Annette begins to reminisce about her haunting past. Her origins trace back to the Afro-Caribbean landscape. Born as a slave on a plantation near Saint-Domingue, Annette's lineage is intertwined with divine roots, with her father's side connecting her to Ogun, the Yoruba god of war and iron, and her mother's side to Orunmila, the Yoruba god of divination, wisdom, and intelligence. She recalled the harrowing cruelty inflicted upon her by Vaublanc, and how the awakening to the true extent of her ancestral power came after her mother faced the unspeakable torment as a slave, being killed for employing magical wards associated with witchcraft. Years later, her vampire master's brutal branding attempt marked another turning point in her life. With newfound abilities, Annette forged a blade from dust and metal particles, thwarting the branding iron and making her escape. She sought refuge in the city, where she encountered Edward, who aided her in the breaking free from her captor and led her to the heart of the anti-slavery revolution. Within the revolution, Annette encountered a voodoo mambo named Cecil, who became her mentor, unraveling the secrets of her magic and ancestry. Edward's transformation into a night creature. Edward was initially a gifted opera singer who turned into a vampire hunter after his life-changing encounter with Annette. Together, they traveled across Europe to France until they narrowed down Richter's whereabouts and joined the cause in vanquishing the Vampire Messiah. As part of the group's mission, Edward accompanied them to the vampire nest in the chateau. Tragically, during their hasty retreat from an entire horde of vampires and night creatures, Edward fell behind. Unfortunately, he could not catch up as a horde got hold of him, draining every last drop of blood. To his surprise, Edward was resurrected as a night creature, retaining the memories of his former life. The shocking twist came when sent for his first mission in this new form. He defied the usual bloodlust and saved Annette instead of attacking her, leading to his imprisonment by his vampiric masters. In his cell, Edward resorted to singing songs which had a surprising impact on the other night creatures held there, making them reminisce of memories from their mortal lives, which honestly was an attribute never witnessed before. His transformation is both spine-chilling and intense, although his case is definitely rare as far as night creatures within Castlevania go. Richter regains his magical abilities. In a scene where Richter first makes acquaintance with his grandfather, Just Belmont, a sudden vampire attack catches them off guard. In a dire situation where Richter witnesses his grandfather being overwhelmed, he makes a critical decision to persist, even at the potential cost of everything he holds dear. At this moment, Richter's dormant magical powers are awakened. With newfound strength, he ruthlessly dispatches the vampires with relative ease, unforgivably slicing them into two. When questioned by the surviving vampires about how he accomplished this feat, Richter responds by emphasizing that he had people left in his life to love, a luxury his grandfather had never allowed himself to experience. With his newfound abilities, Richter heads home to Tara and Maria and joins them alongside Annette in saving the world from vampire domination and stopping Elizabeth Bathory from devouring the sun. Teras Sacrifice. To save Maria's life, Richter Belmont's adventure took quite a dark turn. Despite his renewed magical abilities, the arrival of the Vampire Messiah, Elizabeth Bathory, spelled trouble for the new gang of vampire hunters because no matter what they blasted her with, nothing was enough to take down the vampire goddess. Now, Elizabeth was determined to turn the young sorceress Maria and bend her will to secure an alliance with the Forge Master, because even if Emmanuel was an estranged father, he still loved Maria. In a desperate bid to protect her daughter, Tara selflessly volunteered to take Maria's place. Despite Richter's best efforts, he found himself powerless to prevent this horrific transformation, hopelessly watching as Elizabeth fed Tara her blood, but with her speaker magic and the blood of Sekhmet coursing through her vampirical vein. It remains to be seen what Tara's fate has in store. Alucard's iconic comeback in Castlevania Nocturn. In the final moments of Castlevania Nocturn, the young vampire killers find themselves on the brink of defeat as Richter, Annette, Tara, and Maria's plan to destroy the Abbot's Forge Master machine has backfired, leading to Tara sacrificing herself to Elizabeth Bathory in a desperate bid to save Maria from her nefarious schemes. With their plan in ruins, the remaining heroes are left in a dire predicament, pursued by the Vampire Messiah's lieutenant, Drolta Zuentus, and her legion of monstrous creatures, seemingly with no hope of escape. However, just as Drolta prepares to deliver a fatal blow towards Richter, a dramatic twist occurs and a well-known sword pierces through Drolta's heart. The wielder of the sword is none other than Alukard, the son of Dracula himself, who seemingly has risen again to vanquish the world of evil. Marvelous verdict. By now we can unanimously agree that all these 23 scenes have left an indelible mark in the Castlevania universe. Some harrowing, some heart-wrenching, and a few simple portrayals of pure gory bloodshed. Witnessing these moments for the first time truly made us jump back in our seats. Maybe the future will give us more such brutally intense scenes to add on to this list. Anyways, do you think we missed out on anything from the adaptations? Let us know in the comment box below.